On November 13th, 1974, in the affluent community of Amityville, New York, on Long Island, a seemingly normal, loving family was found dead. 6 of them. There was only one surviving family member left to tell the story. What happened to the DeFeo family? This is True Crime Out Loud.
I'm your host, B.
And I'm your host, Jen.
And this week's case is an exciting one. I was really looking forward to this one because everyone has heard of the Amityville Horror, and that's what this case deals with. But first, we're going to talk about Amityville, New York, the place. Amityville is a village that is located in the town of Babylon on Long Island in Suffolk County, New York. And Long Island gets its name because it is an island that actually extends over 100 miles into the Atlantic Ocean. So the population of Amityville, located on Long Island, is about 9,500 residents. It covers about 2.5 square miles. It's a reasonably affluent area with a median income of $75,000. Little known fact of Amityville is that actor Alec Baldwin was born there. I want to talk about the thing that everybody is wondering about, and that is Amityville Horror, the movie. And yes, Amityville Horror, the movie, does have direct ties to the DeFeo family in the case. But Amityville Horror, the movie, was produced in 1979. It starred James Brolin and Margot Kidder. And there was a remake of it in 2005 starring Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George. Now, Amityville Horror, the movie, was based on a book by the same name written by author Jay Anson in 1977. And I imagine a lot of our listeners have seen the movie, but for those who haven't, it's based on supposed paranormal events that occurred at this home in Amityville, located at 112 Ocean Avenue. And the story, the book itself, is based on accounts given by 2 residents of the home, George and Kathy Lutz. We will get into more of that later on. So the home definitely has a sordid past, and it was at one time occupied by the DeFeo family.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the DeFeo family. First of all, we have Ronald DeFeo Sr. He was called Ronnie, and he began dating a girl named Louise Marie Brigante, and they married. So Louise was this beautiful woman, and she wanted to be a model. Louise's parents did not approve of her marrying Ronnie, and she actually cut ties with her family until after her first child was born. Now, when they first got married, they lived in Brooklyn, New York, and then they started their family. The first child of that family was Ronald DeFeo Jr., born in 1951, and he was called Butch. So after this, she reunites back with her family. July 1956, daughter Dawn Teresa was born. August 1961, daughter Allison Louise was born. September 1962, son Mark Gregory was born. And October of 1965, baby son John Matthew was born. Now, Ronnie worked as a service manager at a car dealership, and this car dealership was owned by Louise's father, Michael Brigante Sr. One thing we do know is at some point between the birth of the last 2 children, Mark Gregory and John Matthew, and that was 1962 and 1965, Louise did leave Ronnie for a while. And during this time, Ronnie co-wrote a song called The Real Thing, and it was recorded by a famous jazz musician, Joe Williams, and it was on his album, One is a Lonesome Number. They have all their children, and Ronnie and Louise buy this upscale home in 1965 at 112 Ocean Avenue. They moved the entire family to Long Island in this community of Amityville, New York.
And let's talk about that home located at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house was a 3-story Dutch colonial-style home, and it sat on the Amityville River. The home was built in 1927, and it actually sold in 2010 for $950,000. I thought this was a pretty interesting fact about it, too. The address has been changed, so the village of Amityville had this address changed because there were so many people coming and gawking at the home and showing up just to see where this event took place. It became almost like a tourist attraction.
Yeah, I think I would want my address changed too.
Yeah.
Well, the events that we're going to talk about occurred on Wednesday, November 13th of 1974. 23-year-old Butch DeFeo, now remember he's the oldest, he came running into Henry's Bar around 6:30 p.m. And Henry's Bar was located on the corner of Merrick Road and Ocean Avenue, so it was only a block from the DeFeo home. Butch yelled to the people, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Butch's best friend, Robert Kelsky, who went by Bobby, was in the bar. And Bobby is an out-of-work brick mason, but he said Butch fell to his knees and Bobby went to him. And Butch said to Bobby, "Bobby, you got to help me. Somebody shot my mother and father." Bobby asked Butch if he was sure, have you checked to make sure they're not just sleeping or something? And Butch told Bobby, "I don't think so." So Bobby gathers up a posse of men from the bar to go to the home. He gets John Altieri, Joey Yeswit, Al Saxton, and William Sacradamaglia.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm sure I said that wrong, but William was the owner of Henry's Bar. So these 5 men plus Butch, so we have 6 men total, loaded into Butch's car, which was a 1970 blue Buick Electra 225. And Bobby says he drove as fast as possible to the DeFeo home. Now, they've only driven a block. Bobby went up the front steps and somebody yelled at Bobby to be careful because somebody might be in there, but Bobby said he didn't care. He was worried about his best friend Butch's family. So Bobby opens an unlocked front door. And he said when he went in, Shaggy, the family dog, who was a big sheepdog, was barking, and he was tied up inside the kitchen, which was normal, a normal thing for Shaggy to be tied up. So Bobby, along with some of the other men, went up the stairs to the second floor, and they were following Bobby because Bobby, remember being best friends with Butch, knew where the master bedroom was, and that's where he went to. And when he walks into the master bedroom, he could smell a smell that wasn't good. He turned on the light, and he saw 43-year-old Ronnie and 42-year-old Louise lying in their bed, bloody and dead. They had apparent gunshot wounds. Joey Yeswit, one of the men in the group, goes to the home phone and he calls police. So they know they have 2 people dead. Well, in the meantime of this 911 call, the other people find 12-year-old Mark and 9-year-old John in separate beds in their room, face down and dead from gunshot wound. They also find 13-year-old Allison in her bed, face down, and dead from a gunshot wound.
We usually like to try to have you listen to 911 recordings, but because this case happened in 1974, we were unable to locate an audio recording, but we did find some transcripts. So for this week, what we're going to do is Jen will read the operator's portion and I will read the caller's portion. And in this instance, the caller is Joey Yeswit, and this is his call to police.
And we did cut out some of the 911 call that was just him repeating his name and the spelling of his name and that kind of thing. So the call comes into the police, the operator. "This is Suffolk County Police. May I help you?"
We have a shooting here. DeFeo.
"Sir, what is your name?"
Joey Yeswit.
"Your phone number?"
I don't even know if it's here. I don't have a phone number here.
"Okay, where are you calling from?"
It's in Amityville. Call up the Amityville police, and it's right off Ocean Avenue in Amityville.
"Merrick Road? What's the problem, sir?"
It's a shooting.
There's a shooting. Anybody hurt?
Yeah, it's everybody's dead.
What do you mean everybody's dead?
I don't know what happened. Kid come running in the bar. He says everybody in the family was killed, and we came down here.
Hold on a second, sir. And at this point, a police officer takes over the call from the 911 operator, so I will be police officer from here on out. What number on the house?
I don't even know that.
Where are you at? Ocean Avenue and what?
In Amityville. Call up the Amityville police and have someone come down here. They know the family.
Amityville?
Yeah, Amityville.
Okay, now tell me what's wrong.
I don't know. Guy come running in the bar and said his mother and father are shot. We ran down to his house and everybody in the house is shot. I don't know for how long, so
what's the address of the house?
Hold on, let me go look up the number. All right, hold on. 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville.
Is that right in the village limits?
It's in the village limits.
Okay, what's your phone number?
I don't even have one. There's no number on the phone.
All right, where are you calling from? Public phone?
No, I'm calling right from the house because I don't see a number on the phone.
You're at the house itself?
Yeah.
How many bodies are there?
I think, I don't know. I think they said 4.
There's 4?
Yeah.
All right, you stay right there at the house, and I'll call the Amityville Village Police Department, and they'll come down. Forgive our acting skills. We weren't trying to act. We just wanted to read so you got an idea of the 911 call and how it took place.
We like for everybody to get to hear it, but we weren't acting. I promise.
So anyway, during the meantime, they find the body of 18-year-old Dawn in her third-floor bedroom. She was face down and dead from a gunshot wound. So the only surviving family member was Butch DeFeo, and he was taken to the police department that night to give a statement. And here is Butch's statement to the police on that Wednesday, November 13th of 1974. He said on Tuesday the 12th, he stayed home from work because he was sick to his stomach. He worked with his father, and they usually rode together, so his father just went on to work and left Butch at home. Butch said he went to bed about 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, fell asleep in a sitting room next to his parents' bedroom watching TV. He woke up about 4 a.m. with stomach pain, and at this time, he saw Mark's wheelchair by the second-floor bathroom. Now, Mark was in a wheelchair because he had been injured playing in sports and was temporarily using a wheelchair while he recovered. So he sees Mark's wheelchair by the second-floor bathroom. He heard the toilet flush, so he assumed it was Mark. He decided to go ahead and leave early for work and left around 4:45 a.m. He said he stopped at Sal's Luncheonette before going to work, where he ate. And he arrived at work at 6:45 a.m. Now, his father wasn't at work that day. Butch normally rode with him, but because he left early, but his father didn't show up. But Butch knew that his father had to take Mark to a doctor's appointment, so that he wasn't expecting him. But Butch said he only stayed at work till about 1 p.m. on Wednesday, and then he decided he wanted to leave. He kind of made his own schedule and came and went as he pleased, and we'll get into more of that here later. He left work, he said, and went to Mindy Weiss's house in Massapequa. And he left Mindy's house about 3 p.m. Now, at some point during the afternoon, he had called his family home several times, but nobody answered. He said he knew he called about noon before he left work because they needed him to leave his paycheck stubs out where he could get them to take to his probation officer. He didn't have his own house key to get in, so he needed someone to leave them out for him. Well, he ended up not going to see his probation officer because he couldn't reach anybody at the home. He said when he left Mindy's at 3, he drove by his family home and the cars were there, but no one answered the door, so he went down to Henry's bar. He got to Henry's about 3:10 p.m., and he said during his course of time there at Henry's, he drank about 4 or 5 vodka and 7-Ups. Well, at about 4, he went to Bobby Geiger's house, but Bobby wasn't home, so he goes back to the bar. He's doing a lot of moving this afternoon, so if you get confused, I'm going to try to slow it down. He said he was in no hurry to go home because he knew nobody was there. He stayed at the bar again until about 4:30, and then he went back to Bobby Geiger's house. And he said he stayed at Bobby's house talking to him until about 5:45 or so. He called home again, and then he called Mindy. Then he went back to Henry's bar. He had a conversation while at Henry's bar with Bobby Kelsky, remember his best friend. And he told Bobby he hadn't been able to reach his family. And he told Bobby that he was going to go back to the house and try to find some way to get in because he didn't have his key. So Butch says he went to the kitchen and he forced his way in. He climbed in and all the lights were out except one over a large family picture that was in the living room. And it had been on when he left earlier, so that wasn't unusual. But the outside front light on some statues they had was on, and he knew he had turned them off when he left for work. He said when he got into the home, he walked through the dining room, turned 2 lights on, and went upstairs to his parents' room. He said when he went in the room, he turned on the light, and he froze. His father was face down in the bed, no shirt, and he could see a hole in his back with blood by the hole. He thinks his mother was on her side. He ran downstairs and out the front door, and he said he had to unlock the front door because it was locked, got into his car, and went straight to Henry's bar. He didn't know about his siblings being deceased at the time because he saw his parents and panicked. And that's when he told Bobby, and the 6 of them went back to the house. He said when he had gone to Bobby Geiger's house earlier that evening, he had shot up heroin in his right arm that he had bought from Bobby's wife, Pat, for $20. And he said Pat's also on heroin, but Bobby's not. Butch said he doesn't consider himself an addict. But here's the information Butch gave on possible suspects. He had been having trouble with a man named Tony Mazzeo, and Tony is around 70 years old. Tony was a good friend of his father, Ronnie's. At some point, Tony's house had burned down, so Tony and his wife temporarily lived with the DeFeos, and he knew Tony had a house key. Also, about 2 years ago, he had an argument with Tony at the car dealership because Tony would stop by and visit, and he told Tony that no one liked him and he cursed at him. Well, this caused a problem. Ronnie, the father, tells Butch, his son, he has messed up because Tony is a professional killer, and Butch had caused Ronnie to have to choose between Butch and Tony, and this was not a good position to be in with one of them being a professional killer. Butch also told them that a few weeks prior to the murders, he himself had been robbed. He was taking a deposit to the bank for the car dealership when someone robbed him. We do know that the Friday before the murders, Butch and Ronnie got into an argument at the car dealership about the robbery, and at this point, his dad brought up Tony Mazzeo, thinking that Tony could be involved in this robbery. From the way Ronnie was talking to Butch, he had been in touch with Tony recently. Now, Butch says his dad tells him he told Tony if anything happened to his son, he would kill him, meaning he would kill Tony. So when asked how he knew that Tony was a hitman or a professional killer, he said that Mr. Lee, and now Mr. Lee was one of Carlo Gambino's men, and he's the one that told Ronnie that Tony was a hitman. Ronnie's father, Roca DeFeo, had a brother. His name was Pete. Pete DeFeo was always in the newspaper for his mob connections, according to Butch.
So it sounds to me like Butch is setting up the mob defense.
Well, that's what he's saying. That's who could have possibly done it, because they're looking for suspects and they're looking to him to give them some answers.
Well, let's see if what the police find match up with that. When the police went to 112 Ocean Avenue, they saw no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of any of the family members being drugged. and none of the neighbors reported hearing any gunshots. The responding officers found it unusual that all of the victims were face down. They determined that the murder weapon was a .35 caliber rifle, and they located an empty box of .35 caliber ammunition in Butch's room. The police speculated that the crime took place during the night or the early morning hours, and they based this partially on the fact that the family, when they're found, is still in their pajamas and in their beds. The police officers surmised that the murders took place in about a 15-minute time span. It took about that long to commit the crime, and that it occurred during the early morning hours of Wednesday, November 15th.
So let's go back to talking about Ronald DeFeo Jr., Butch. We heard his statement to the police, but I'm going to give you some information that we know about him. Like I said earlier, he was born in 1951, September 26th. He had a prior conviction for petty larceny, but he got probation for that. Remember, he had a probation officer he was supposed to see. Butch was overweight as a child, and he tended to be picked on at school. In his teen years, he began using amphetamines. And by 17, he was using LSD and heroin, and he was expelled from school for having violent outbursts. When he was 18, he got a job at the car dealership that his granddad owned and his dad worked at. Plus, he would get additional money from his father. His parents also gave him a car. The money he made from working, he would use that to buy guns, alcohol, and drugs. Now, reportedly, Ronnie was abusive, but mostly to Butch. And these statements came from people other than Butch. Other family members did say that he was more aggressive toward Butch. And when Butch started getting older, he began to lash out more and more at his dad. So he began to fight back. They had taken Butch to a psychiatrist, but back in the 70s, it was looked at different, and Ronnie didn't really like the idea of his son being at a psychiatrist, and Butch didn't like the idea of seeing a psychiatrist. His parents tended to try to keep him happy by giving him cash and expensive things. They had even given him a speedboat that cost about $14,000. But by everyone's accounts, this made everything worse with Butch instead of better. Now, the robbery that happened a few weeks before the murders, where he was taking cash for the business and was robbed, that was October of 1974. Butch was supposed to deposit around $20,000 into the bank for the dealership. When the police took the report and questioned him about the robbery, he became enraged and refused to cooperate. And Ronnie began to suspect his son Butch of lying, and he even questioned Butch about what happened with this robbery. Well, when Ronnie came and questioned Butch and made accusations toward him, Butch got angry with Ronnie and threatened to kill him. So the police have done more digging after taking Butch's statement, and he's questioned again. And when he's questioned again, he pointed his finger at a mafia hitman named Louis Fellini. And he said Fellini had a grudge over some work that was done for him at the dealership. He said that Fellini came into the home in those early morning hours and put a revolver to his head. He said then Fellini and another man dragged him from room to room, making him watch as they killed his entire family. However, Fellini had an airtight alibi.
And that shouldn't come as a huge shock, because Fellini's like the fourth mafia tie that he's tried to tie to this.
Well, the police did not believe this, and Butch eventually confessed to murdering his family. He said, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast."
Butch is arrested for the murder of his entire family, and he goes to trial in October of 1975. His attorney, William Weber, tried to present an insanity defense for Butch, but the prosecution's case centered around this telling of the events. The prosecution believed that the crime happened in the early morning hours and that Butch did in fact murder his family using a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. And it was owned by Butch, and the same weapon was used to kill all of the family members. After killing his family members with the Marlin rifle, he showered and gathered his bloody clothing, put the murder weapon in a pillowcase, and dumped it into a storm drain on his way to work. He got to work around 6 a.m., and he told everyone he came in contact with that day that he tried to call his family, but they didn't answer the phone. And if you'll think back to what Jen was talking about, it did seem like he went above and beyond to establish alibis and establish the fact that he had talked to his family. He had threatened a friend with a gun on a hunting trip, so he has a history of threatening violence, and particularly with a firearm. When his parents were in an argument, Butch pointed a 12-gauge shotgun at his father and threatened to kill him. So again, another instance where Butch's anger manifests itself in threatening someone with a firearm. The prosecution had a psychiatrist do an evaluation of Butch, and Dr. Harold Zolan found that he had an antisocial personality disorder, but he was aware of his actions. So he knew right from wrong, and he was motivated by a self-centered attitude. Now, the defense, and as I mentioned before, his attorney was William Weber, and we'll need to make a note of him for later on. His defense attorney presented this insanity defense, and they said that he heard voices that told him to kill his family, and they even hired a psychiatrist who did an evaluation that found that same thing, and that was Dr. Daniel Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz diagnosed Butch as neurotic and having a dissociative disorder. But the jury didn't buy any of that, and on November 21st, 1975, he was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder and was subsequently sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. All of Butch's appeals were subsequently denied. He has been married and divorced 3 times since he's been in prison. He still resides in the custody of the New York Department of Corrections and will turn 70 this year. He became eligible for parole the first time November 12th, 1999, which was obviously denied, and his next parole hearing is scheduled for July of 2021. I don't like his odds of being granted parole.
No, but let's talk about that 1999 parole hearing, because we hear something a little bit different. Butch told the parole board he was not making excuses, but he had a very serious drug problem. He said he heavily used heroin, PCP, mescaline, and LSD. He said the day of the murders, he was in the basement. He heard loud noises coming from upstairs, and he saw Allison, his sister, dead. And then he saw his sister Dawn, and Dawn said, "Oh my God, Butch, you're not supposed to be here." So then Butch gets into an altercation with Dawn, and they fought over the rifle, and he shot her. He said he did not kill the other family members. He was blaming this on Dawn had killed all the family members. Well, he goes up to confront Dawn. They get into it, and he shoots Dawn. And he even elaborated on this to an author in the year 2000. But as we see, Butch has changed his story several times.
And I don't imagine that the evidence with Dawn backed that story up. I mean, there was no evidence on Dawn's body that she was killed during an altercation. They were all found face down in their beds with gunshot wounds.
That is correct. Butch also said on the evening of Tuesday, November 12th, Ronnie was on a tirade, and Butch and 18-year-old Dawn, along with 2 friends, all got high in the basement. And then Dawn was mad because her parents wouldn't let her go to Florida with her boyfriend. So she approached Butch about killing their parents. Around 1 a.m., Butch got his rifle, and his friend, his unnamed friend, had a Colt Python. He said he shot his father twice. He also said his mother moaned as she was dying and was shot a second time. They were supposed to take the younger kids to the grandparents' house in Brooklyn so that they were away and it was just going to be the parents being found dead. But instead, Dawn killed all the kids to eliminate them as witnesses. Butch said he was not in the home when the kids were killed because he was running after one of the friends to help with the cleanup. Now, Butch said after chasing down the friend that had helped kill the family to get him to come back for the cleanup, he returned and realized Dawn had killed the kids of the family also. So he confronted her in her third-floor bedroom. They wrestled for the gun, and then he knocked Dawn out and shot her in the back of the head. So that was the story to the author.
I mean, the story just keeps changing and changing and changing.
Yeah. Well, the parole hearing of 2002, he was in the process of a divorce, and his case was under appeal, and information given at a parole hearing can be used in an appeal. So he did not make any statements at this time, but his grandmother had died and had left him a 6-figure inheritance.
So she gives her grandson a 6-figure inheritance while he's in prison because he was convicted of killing her daughter.
Yes. Whew. So at the 2003 parole hearing, he was asked again if he committed the crimes, and his reply was, "I believe I did." He said he was so involved with drugs and alcohol, "I really don't know what happened." And they pointed out to him that his stories changed several times over the year. And he said, "I really don't know the truth of what happened." He cited the abuse from his father, that it was severe enough that he had even lost teeth from it. So he had turned to drugs and alcohol. He said he loved his entire family, but he couldn't take the abuse anymore.
And Butch is doing what we are seeing as a reoccurring theme every week, this deflection. Like in last week's case where we were so drunk that we don't remember what happened, or now this week we have done so much drugs and we've been abused and we don't remember what happened. It's this classic deflection that seems like all of these guys come up with.
Well, I mean, when you're up for parole, are you really going to take the blame?
Well, but we know that no parole board is going to grant you parole without you taking the blame. That's one of the key tenets of gaining parole, is showing remorse for your crime and admitting your culpability in it.
Well, I think in all the times and all the statements Butch gave, he never admitted to killing the kids. He would never say it. His story changed, and I killed my mom, I killed my dad, I killed both of them, I killed Dawn. But he would not admit to killing the kids. He'll
probably never see parole anyway, but he definitely won't without accepting full responsibility for his crime. That's like stop number one for a parole board.
Well, and I'm glad you say that, because I had written this several weeks ago for us to cover the DeFeo family, because I think it's a very interesting case. And I had it ready and it was on our schedule for next month, but we decided to go ahead and do it now because, like I said, Butch DeFeo is up for his next parole hearing in July of 2021. Well, I should say he was up, because on March 12th of 2021 at 6:35 p.m., 69-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr., a.k.a. Butch, was pronounced dead at Albany Medical Center. He had been taken there from prison, and because it's so recent, we don't know the cause of death yet. I mean, we're at March 25th, and this happened March 12th. But a cause of death will be determined by the Albany County Medical Examiner's Office, and it's pretty much up to the state if they release the cause of death. I'm not going to make any assumptions. He's 69, history of drug abuse. We are in a COVID pandemic. It could be a number of things.
Sure. Well, I don't think he was going to get parole anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what it was looking like.
But the interesting thing about this case, not just the case itself, we never want to present any of these cases as mundane or run-of-the-mill. And this case certainly is no exception. It's not a run-of-the-mill case. Anytime someone kills particularly their own family, it's a horrible thing and extremely abnormal. But what really captures everybody's attention about this case is the house and its ties to the Amityville Horror movie and the Lutz family. And so we're going to talk about the Lutz family and their ties to the house and the DeFeo case. After the murders, George and Kathy Lutz bought the home at 112 Ocean Avenue and moved in on December 18th, 1975. That was about a year and a month after the murders. And they were aware of the crimes that had taken place there. So they had a priest come in and bless the home while they were moving in. All right. But George and Kathy immediately reported strange events in the home. And they reported things like random cold spots and just jolting sounds during the night and all around eerie vibes. And family members, particularly George, the father, had severe personality changes. George began to seclude himself and could never stay warm in the home, even when in front of the fireplace. So he's having these cold flashes, basically. He just didn't want to leave the home, and he would have people come over rather than him going to visit anyone. And it wasn't just the Lutz family that reported strange things going on in the home at 112 Ocean Avenue. Friends would sit in the kitchen, and they reported that they could hear noises coming from upstairs after the kids were in bed, and they would go check on the noises and make sure that the kids were okay and that kind of thing, and still in their beds. Kathy, George's wife, reported that she had been touched by an unseen person on several occasions. She would be awoken from her sleep, and when she looked in the mirror, her face was that of a very old lady, and it took hours for that image to go away from the mirror. So just a really eerie, supernatural things going on. They reported that their kids argued more than usual. Their youngest child, Missy, often spoke to an angel named Jody that would appear in their living room. And Jody would sometimes present herself as a large pig, but could change her shape. George and Kathy also reported seeing two red eyes looking at them from upstairs bedroom windows and that kind of thing. The final event, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess, for the house at 112 Ocean Avenue, was one night Kathy was lifted up off the bed, slid away from George, and he felt someone or something get into bed with them. He was unable to move or get up. He heard the kids' beds being slammed up and down and sliding on the floor. They reported lights flickering and noises being heard in the air conditioner. And they had brought the family dog upstairs that night, and the dog was pacing in circles and threw up several times that night. The next morning, the kids were frightened, and Kathy didn't even remember most of it. So, I mean, sounds like one hellacious night of everything going crazy and kids' beds bouncing around and dogs spinning in circles and lights flickering. And so
I don't think I would have waited for the daylight to come.
No. But I guess if you're frozen in your bed, you can't really do a whole lot about it. But the next day, January 14th, 1976, they were out of there, and they had lived there less than a month. So Ed and Lorraine Warren came to the home in February after the Lutz family moved out and confirmed the paranormal activity. Now, they're famous like
paranormal investigators, I think.
Ghost hunters or whatever. So they come in, and the idea is that they set up their monitoring equipment and stuff and examine your home for paranormal activity. And this was not their only gig. I mean, they had done this in several other locations, but they came there to confirm paranormal activity at 112 Ocean Avenue. Years later, an attorney came forward and said that the Lutz family had approached him about a book idea, and the three of them concocted this story about the house after they had been drinking a lot. So,
well, I mean, that's just the statement of the attorney, though.
Yeah, but I mean, he's basically claiming that it never really happened and that they all got drunk and came up with this idea so that they could sell it for a book. And let's face it, they had the perfect house. This horrible crime had taken place there. And now, we told you to remember the attorney's name, okay? The attorney was William Weber. And if you'll recall, that was the same one who had been Butch's defense attorney. So this guy had inside knowledge of the case, and now he's hooking up with the family that lives in the DeFeo home, and he claims, over some bottles of wine, come up with this story to sell a book deal. And the Lutzes, they took several polygraphs and passed, but any True Crime Out Loud aficionado knows that my opinion on those is that they're junk science. It seems like pathological liars can pass them, and people telling the truth often get tripped up. But people believed the story of the Lutz family for years, especially after the book. It kind of took off, and it gained even more traction with the first movie. But now it's kind of been debunked, and people refer to it as the Amityville hoax. But as we said earlier, the address has been changed at the home, and it's been renovated since these events.
So it doesn't look like, it was known for these windows on it that look like eyes or half moon windows, and they're gone from the home now. I'm going to put pictures on our website. But like I said, I mean, this was an interesting case. We had it set to go on our schedule for next month, and then lo and behold, Butch DeFeo dies, so we figured we might want to move it up so we could go ahead and add that into this week's case.
And it's got neat ties. I mean, it ties into this movie that was very popular for its time, and then it had a remake, and I think people really tend to kind of seize on the paranormal activity stuff. And like we said, they got a perfect house to be the host for this paranormal activity story.
And if Mr. Weber, the attorney, is to be believed, they concocted this over several bottles of wine. People have done a lot dumber things over several bottles of wine and not made a whole lot of money off of it like this turned into be.
And I guess it really just depends on where you stand with the whole paranormal activity thing. Do you believe it or do you not believe it? And I guess that has a lot of influence on whether you believe Weber or whether you believe the Lutzes.
Well, we want to know what you think.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the case this week. It was an interesting one for us, and I really like the ones that have these kind of unique ties, like the movie tie thing. That was pretty interesting to me. We'll see you next week. We would like to hear your thoughts on this and all of our cases, and as always, you can reach us by email at truecrimeoutloud@gmail.com, Facebook and Instagram at True Crime Out Loud. Out Loud is 2 words, not one, and Twitter at TC Out Loud.
Photos, links, and sources for this case can be found on our website at www.truecrimeoutloud.com.